Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, March 20th public hearing with the Board of Estimate and Tax related to the operating budget. Thank you to all who are in attendance. To start, Madam Clerk, may we call a roll, please?
Mayor Rilling,
Here.
Mr. Abrams,
Here.
Mr. Camacho,
I'm here.
Mr. Constant,
Here.
Mr. Gilleret,
Here.
Mr. Casimis, Ms. Yang. Here. 6, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Before we begin officially tonight, I just need to clarify some meeting scheduling comments that I made at the end of our last BET meeting. Tonight will be the public hearing only. We will schedule another special meeting of the BET on Thursday of next week to continue our deliberations based on the feedback from this evening. And then in our regular meeting on April 1st, finalize any budget recommendations back to the city. So comments that I made earlier regarding executive session and other things tonight were incorrect, and I apologize for confusion on that regard. Before we get started with public comment, Mr. Mayor, any comments to start today's meeting?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Abrams, and thank you, everybody, for coming out. This is a process that we have been working on for quite some time. First of all, I want to thank the BET members, Board of Estimate and Taxation members, who have really worked hard to try to bring this budget season to a successful conclusion. I also want to thank the department heads who did everything they possibly could to trim our budget down as much as we can. This is still a work in progress. We know that there are concerns. We have those same concerns. We share them. And this is still a work in progress, and we're still going to be meeting, looking to identify any additional revenue streams, any additional areas where we may be able to cut the budget even further. So thank you all for coming out, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
As we start this evening, I'll remind everybody that each individual who has signed up to speak will be allotted 3 minutes. You'll be warned when you're getting close to that time. Our job as Board of Estimate and Tax this evening is to listen to your feedback, to take that seriously, to consider it as part of our ongoing deliberations. We will sit here and for the most part, be doing just that this evening. With that, Tom, I believe you are going to control the speakers in terms of order, and we'll alternate between, I believe, in the room here and the Common Council chambers, as well as anyone online who wishes to speak.
All right, so the first sign-up sheet here, number 1 is Aaron Carr.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Carr. I know some of you may know me. I have lived in Norwalk now since 1976. So I've seen the good times and the bad times. And I will say, as opening remarks, that I appreciate the work that you're all trying to do and understand the severity of the situation that we face. But I'm here to specifically call out that in my case, I'm in a district where I believe I'm going to be hit with a 36% increase in taxes, and that is completely unacceptable. I've been in the corporate world for a very long time. I have faced situations where companies face similar initiatives that they had to deal with when there wasn't any revenue and there was something that needed to be done. And so I'm here to really ask that we look a little deeper into how to be able to minimize the hit of such a large tax amount. First of all, it's not just a personal problem for me because I'm getting to a point where I'm going to retire soon. So regardless of what the house is worth, I'm being put into a position of staying here or not staying in this town. That is one issue that I'm grasping with. But besides that, I think that one way I would request that you look at a little deeper is perhaps cutting the budget by the 5% across the board, and maybe over the next number of years, over the next 5 years, figure out a way to maybe claw back some or add some additional percentages of increase on the taxes so that the bite, and the biggest concern I have is the baseline. We are establishing a baseline here, and in 2025, we will come back and you'll ask for another 5%, which will be an effective 7 to 8% from this year. So we're looking at gradually increasing all of that. And I think we just need to act accordingly to take a look at the budget. I know you've made an attempt to cut the budget, but I think a 5% reduction across the budget will get us to a better place. I do understand the whole reval concept and how this thing works. But nevertheless, I come back to my initial comment that
30
36%
seconds.
increase in 1 year and setting up this new baseline that we're going to work for the next 5 years is just not acceptable to me. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to voice that opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carp.
All right, the next one is a dial-in, Nora Idzowski Eichner. You can unmute her, please, James, or promote to panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Thank you so much. I really want to. Pardon? So I want to start by thanking the BET. We have given you a thankless task this year, and I fully acknowledge that. And I want to say that to be clear, we did not give you that task, right? State law gave you that task. The realities of our national economy and our local economy gave you that task. And I think that unfortunately, that is the perspective from which we have to operate. But what I want to really say to you all as you're making these deliberations is that regardless of what we increase or decrease, people's taxes are going to increase by an extraordinary amount this year. And what I ask you not to do is disinvest in services so that people are seeing enormous tax increases and seeing the services they're receiving from the city decrease. No 5% decrease is going to reduce the hit in any truly meaningful way for most of our taxpayers, but it will cause our taxpayers to see an immediate and unacceptable decrease in the services that they're receiving. Further, I really want to ask you to be thinking strategically about how we can invest a little bit to get a lot more. Issues that we have identified in the past include increasing our grant writing and grant coordination staff. There's a tremendous amount of federal money coming for infrastructure, which is one of our most expensive areas in our budget. We would be far better prepared to leverage that and thereby decrease the hit on our budget overall by having a small increase of a grant writer position. Second, the efficiency study identified IT as the city's #1 barrier to being efficient. We could provide better services to our residents for a fairly minor increase in our overall budget if we had more IT staff that could better leverage technology to improve the services we offer. So in closing, I want to urge you not to be penny wise and pound foolish. We have not invested in crucial things like IT over decades and have now left us in a situation where we cannot efficiently provide services or cannot provide services as efficiently as we would like. And further cuts that decrease our efficiency ultimately are going to hurt our residents. So thank you again for your work. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you, Nora.
All right, next one, back in the room, Vinny Cicitano.
Good evening, Vinny Cicitano, North 56 Winding Lane. I'm here to speak on behalf of people I speak to every single day in my neighborhood, people that I know very well. Quick story. So I traveled, I went to a hotel in upstate Massachusetts, border New York, Massachusetts, and I was at this lovely hotel, big grounds, beautiful, sitting around a fire pit with the owner and his family and guests. And we were discussing, as always, you meet strangers, you start talking about where you come from. And we started talking about taxes, and the tax on this hotel, this lovely hotel with a fire pit, swimming pool, everything was $1,800 a year. And I said to him, how can this be $1,800 a year? I told him the tax on my house was upwards of, 12,000. And he says, well, he points behind him and he says, there's windmills in the hills, in the mountains. And the power company subsidizes the town because of the windmills. So at this point in time, I believe, and a lot of people believe, that a lot of these apartment buildings that were built should have been our windmills. Unfortunately, this is where we are at this point. The burden of this tax increase is going to be placed on the property owners, of residential property owners, and people out here are struggling. We're having a hard time. There's a lot of people that are having a difficult time. And I believe that this tax burden that's being placed upon us to carry all these expenditures and spending has got to slow down, because we are chasing Norwalkers out of Norwalk. There's Norwalkers that are leaving. There's Norwalkers that are complaining that are leaving. We're not doing well by the single family residential Norwalkers. Coupled with last year's vision of doubling the size of a lot of neighborhoods to 2 families, the residential property owners here are feeling like they're like the enemy. So I think that has to change. I think that we need to really reel in spending. I think we need to think about all the money that we spend. And there's different things you hear out there that frustrate people. A lot of people in the community are frustrated, and I think that's never good. We don't really want discourse in our community. We want a community where everyone's happy and wants to be here and wants to continue living here. When we see things, expenditures like $40,000 for a Christmas tree, $100,000 for a Halloween party, a lot of people see that as uncontrolled, irresponsible spending. Would anybody in local government take $40,000 out of their pocket to rent a Christmas tree? No. Well, then how we feel about it is that you're reaching into our pocket and taking $40,000 to rent a Christmas tree. It's not a lot of money. It's not the point. I just use that as an example, that we need to reel in spending back
2 minutes,
to
30 seconds.
pre-COVID expenditures and start our budget from there, because a lot of this money that we spent has been through the sugar high of American Rescue Plan money that we've been spending. I think we need to turn back a little bit and reevaluate everything and think of the residential property owners in this community first and foremost, because we are the heart of this community. So we need to do better by them, by people that want to continue living here. And I think that's very important. So I would say that we need to reel in our expenditures a little bit and go back to pre-COVID spending and work from there. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next via Zoom is Brian Meek.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the BET. Brian Meek, 11 Cranberry Woods Road in Norwalk. I'm asking tonight that you give a haircut to this budget increase of 37. I'm asking for 37%. That's $7.5 million. If you cut $7.5 million across the departments, you're still getting a 3% increase across the board. I think that's more than reasonable. There's several factors driving this, and it's basically the biggest one is the council's out of control spending habits. And I hear this talk about, services we need. This council just spent $1,350 on garbage cans, one garbage can that if you look on Amazon, you can find something just as good for about $300 or $400. So I really don't want to hear about how we're going to lose services. Now, if we lose services, that's a shame, but you could lose some of the frivolous spending on this stuff we don't need and can't afford. And that's small potatoes. The elephant in the room here is our debt service, which is ballooning out of control. It's going to be over 50 million. It's our second largest line item after education, and it's grown out of control. Norwalk High is being dug up. It's already a month late, and we don't even have a cost of capital analysis on this project, a $300 million project that we have to pick up the debt service for, regardless of reimbursements from the state. We're eating that money while the state gets to collect interest on that money that they've put aside. It's outrageous. You need to cut the spending, look at every single department, outside of baseline personnel contract increases, everything should be frozen. Thank you.
Ryan?
In the council chambers, Lisa Britton is next.
I typed it out. I think it's 3 minutes.
Lisa Britton, 19 Shorefront Park. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I've been watching most of the BET meetings and I appreciate all the digging deeper that you guys have been doing for cost savings. You all understand that this isn't just a one-year budget problem. It's our new reality. 3 areas building up for some time that have dramatically impacted the budget include housing and commercial market trends, immigration's impact on our schools, and our historically inadequate ECS school funding from Hartford that equates to tens of millions of dollars. The 2 budget scenarios that Tom Ellis prepared, a flat budget and a 0 rainy day fund drawdown, and the 4% and an 8% or an 8 million rainy day drawdown really showed nominal difference in our tax bills. I would argue that no amount of development will dig us out of this hole. City Hall's focused a lot on large scale apartments for the last decade, and it's been touted that the 333 million in construction, things would be worse. But even if all those were taxed at their full rate, excluding the tax abatement schedules, they'd only generate 5 million in revenue. That's 5 days of running our schools. We've prided ourselves on being a small town, but now we have big city problems, poverty, and demands. We can't control the state's policy on immigration and exclusionary zoning in our neighboring towns, but we also can't keep funding student poverty for Fairfield County without help from Hartford. We can't keep up with year-on-year Board of Ed increases with each new superintendent brings with their increased administration, staff turnovers, curriculum rewrites, or school mismanagement. Norwalk reinvents the wheel with each superintendent, and it costs us a fortune. Yet academic standards, student behavior, and test scores have tanked. We can't keep handing over tax abatements or paying up for politically motivated land use lawsuits. We can't keep funding lawsuits by city and BOE employees. We can't allow 6-figure staff to tell us they have no bandwidth for 200 backlogged neighborhood blight cases. We can't allow staff to tell us that they can't implement parking permits on our overcrowded streets. We can't allow economic community development to pursue vanity projects or ad campaigns for tourism when corporates like Woostop, GE, Diageo, Pepperidge Farms, and others leave Norwalk. The last census claimed a population of about 91,000 folks with a per capita income of 57,000 and a household income of 97,000. Our poverty is at 10.9%, our foreign-born residents at 29.9%, veterans, we have about 2,000 of those, retirees over 65, 15.8%, and the under 18s are almost 20%. You can't expect residential properties to carry these costs. We're on our way to becoming Bridgeport. Eventually, there is a cap on property values when local tax burdens are too high. Please lower the cap on the 2024 budget and mitigate the next 5 years by slowing down cost projections. Implement a flat budget for 24-25 and use the 8 million in rainy day funds. Integrate duplicate functions for the city and the Board of Ed, integrate, I should say, and implement additional revenue sources for blight and zoning enforcement, residential parking permits, and stronger ECS to Hartford to fund our schools. Otherwise, none of us are going to be here in 5 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa.
The last individual on Zoom does not have a name, but the last 4 on the phone number is 2345, James.
Press *6 to unmute.
They just mute. Looks like it muted.
To the phone number ending in 2345, please press *6 to unmute.
And please state your name and address before speaking.
I might suggest that while we deal with technical problems there, we go to one other speaker in the room.
All right, Linnell Jones is the next one up.
My name is Linnell Jones and my address is 10 Point Road. On behalf of many taxpayers and senior citizens, I thank the members of this commission for looking out for the public interest. Thank you for supporting a 5% across the board cut in expenses. Questioning the commercial mill rate, and I implore all of you to equitably address Norwalk's Board of Education's ever-growing expenses. It has been stated that it costs $20,000 a year per student in Norwalk. But if in-kind expenses like teachers' pensions, city IT and legal services, debt on new schools are included, the true cost is closer to $40,000 a year per student. Seldom are things as they appear. Norwalk still has between 150 million and 200 million in approved projects that have not been funded, budgeted for, and we are on the verge of losing our AAA rating, making our debt outstanding more expensive than ever. It is well known that just over 50 million more in city expenses, bringing our budget to $500 million, triggers a downgrade review. ARPA funds, which could have been used to bond the approved projects, were spent elsewhere. ARPA is now over. One reason expenses are increasing. Losing our AAA rating is our own fault if it happens. Please do not let this happen. To hear that the new apartments, which likely have 7-year tax abatements, will result in more car tax revenue is misdirection, because these new families often bring additional children to our schools. Many of the new children do not speak English, are not at grade level because they've been out of schools. A holistic approach, including efficiency and accountability, is the only way to look at the Board of Education's situation. Anyone can spend money. What Norwalk spends per student has not resulted in any measurable educational goal. So a little soul searching and open, honest dialogue about performance goals and spending with teachers, administrators, and unions makes sense. Across departments, 5% cuts will result in higher efficiency,
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
fewer catered lunches, and well-needed debates across many departments about skill sets and how to measure accountability and performance. Throwing money at problems does not solve problems, but problems cost money. The city didn't budget for the surprise 50 million consent decree with DEEP, and this will not be the last surprises from stormwater management. Cutting 5% will force the stormwater
right, 3 minutes.
authority discussion, long overdue in Norwalk. Meanwhile, where are the revenues? Why are companies leaving? What is the new Office of Economic and Community Development bringing to Norwalk? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we still have Zoom call ending in 2345 if you'd like to try one more time.
If you'd like to speak, please press *6 to unmute.
Can we unmute her from here? Or that, can we unmute that number from here? All right, we're still having technical difficulties, so let's move on.
Barbara Smith up next.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Barbara Smith. I live at 4 Brook Hill Lane. Thank you so much for your work on this unprecedented budget. It's really, really tough, something that we have never seen before, where we have tax increases that are almost exclusively due to our property values. This is really tough, and I thank you for your work and your service to our city. I'm here tonight to advocate on behalf of the Family Navigators under the Community Services Department, also known as the Community Resource Hub. And I would like to thank you, Mayor, for your commitment to fund the Family Navigators this year. Just to give the BET a little background, 3 years ago, the Community Services Department entered into an agreement with the Ritter Foundation to fund these positions that would help people in need here in Norwalk to find the services that they need. And the agreement was that if this was a successful program, the city would absorb these positions. And so here we are at 3 years, and none of us could have have expected that we would be in such a difficult budget season to absorb those positions. But I do want to talk to you about how successful this program has been, and maybe we can look at some ways to work around it. My understanding is that negotiations are ongoing and there may be some grant funding available this year, but the past 3 years with this program, the family navigators have served well over several thousand of our most vulnerable residents. The family navigators have helped residents stay in their homes by referring them to services that provide them with food, clothing, rent assistance, job training and certifications, childcare, and also leading them to other state programs that can be helpful to them. So what I'm asking is, these positions they're about $52,000 a year salaries. There are 3 of them. I know that we're looking at possibly some grant funding, but I'd like to ask you to have a plan for how moving forward. Maybe this year you can find a way as you're scrubbing the budget to bring one of them on staff
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
and then fund the others next year, bring 2 on this year, 1 next year. But our residents are our most precious resource, and we need to do everything we can to keep them here in Norwalk with this crucial program, especially during these difficult times. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara.
Nobody on Zoom with their hands raised at present. We will continue in the room, and the next individual is Diane Keefe.
Diane Keefe from 249 Chestnut Hill Road. I want to thank everybody for your thoughtful work on this process. I actually am having a big property tax increase too, but I'm not going to protest it. I know it's a fact that is the flip side of all of our properties increasing in value, because Norwalk actually is a great place to live. And a lot of people from New York City came and decided to move here because they realized that there are a lot of advantages to having backyards. Also, I've met a lot of the people who live in the multifamily buildings who have moved in here in the last 5 years. A lot of them work at ASML up in Wilton, and they'd rather live in Norwalk because it's cool. So we actually are in a pretty good position as a city, and I just hope we make smart investments going forward. I agree with the person who talked about investing in IT. I do not like the idea of across the board cuts. That is the lazy way to cut. Everybody has to do really hard work to find really smart ways to cut if they're going to cut it all. But I propose that we look a lot harder on ways to invest in getting access to the Inflation Reduction Act money, which is through a grant writer. And the Department of Agriculture right now is giving money for recycling. And we need to really think hard about our food waste management as a city. We need to look hard at putting solar panels on all of our city buildings and all of our schools that can do it. The current programs are allowing people who and businesses and governments who install solar with batteries to get performance payments for at least 10 years from the utility for shaving the peak load. And the math works out now. So it is really worth not only putting solar panels on, but putting batteries on so that you actually help the utilities stop using peak power plants. So these kinds of investments will pay off, and they will also create a stability for our community so that when the power goes out, all of those public facilities could be heating or cooling centers, depending on what they need to be. So thank you for your time, and good luck with the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Diane.
Again, if you're on Zoom and you wish to speak, remember to raise your hand, and then we will acknowledge you and promote you to a panelist. In the meantime, we will stay in the room with Heather Dunn up next.
Guys, I want to say thank you for doing this too. I just want to pause for a second, say how excited I am to see everybody here. It's been really a little disconcerting to sit in council meetings with no one in the audience. So thank you all for coming too. It's really important to have engagement, to hear what people think. I know sometimes I feel like we're in a vacuum, and just with our insider people. So I'm here as a resident because I want to share my perspective on some things too. All departments I don't think are equal. I know we put a cap, an overall cap, and then we look to you guys to look at what's important and what's not important. One of the things that I feel is really important is to look at police and fire, the things that are important for safety of everybody in Norwalk. I believe in social services. I'm a teacher, so I understand the Board of Ed, but we got to really fix the things that are going to make sure that we're all, living in a very nice community safely. And so I'd like to really encourage you to look at funding or approving the fire truck that I know that was in the mix. I know that we wouldn't be paying for it right away, but that we would need to sign up to have it. I think it's a 5-year ahead of time. We have to ask or put our order in. So there's that piece of it. And I just want to say, yeah, all departments are not equal. And so maybe we at some point need to look at the org chart, combining some things that we've added are really nice to have. That's that kind of wants versus needs things. So thank you guys for doing the hard work too, but maybe we need to also look at a bigger picture too. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Heather?
Back to Zoom, we have an individual I see on the board. It says Lynn. I don't know if that's your first or last name, but if you could state your full name and address. Go ahead, James, and unmute.
Lynn, if you wish to speak, please unmute at this time.
All right, I suggest maybe we come back to Lynn in a moment.
Next in the room is Elizabeth Ritchie.
You're going to speak for Elizabeth. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jack Weselek, and I live at 4 Little Way in Norwalk. So we moved here in 2011, and I really like Norwalk. I think it's a great neighborhood. It's a great place to live. I just wanted to put, and I'm affected with roughly a 20% increase in taxes, and I just wanted to put it into perspective. Car insurance went up by 20%. We have some inflation in groceries. We have a soft labor market. The numbers are great, but the numbers are driven by government, by hospitality, and by healthcare. When you look at all the other jobs, it's kind of like stagnant, reducing. Tech is laying off, financial services is laying off. The level of salaries is decreasing. The question is really, how long can people afford living here? And it feels like trying to squeeze blood out of a stone at some degree. It's just really unbearable. And I also understand the level of home increases, but look, homes in my neighborhood were sold, the interest rate was still low. People could buy it. Influx from New York City was here. Now interest rates are higher. It's harder to buy properties, but it's also harder to sell properties. And the level of property values will go down with the increase in taxes, because it is just
way more expense for home buyers to purchase. So all in all, it's just a major hit to people that have been carrying this neighborhood from a financial point of view for a long time. Thank you so much. And I understand your situation, but I just wanted to hear this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane Cece is next.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can.
Good evening. Thank you all, Diane Cece, Olmsted Place in East Norwalk. Before I begin my actual comments, Mr. Ellis is here. Hi, how are you? I wanted to apologize to you. I inadvertently either promoted or maybe demoted you to Chief Financial Officer in some communications that I sent out. It was my mistake. I misread something and I issued edits today. But more importantly, I attributed a comment to you that clearly was taken out of context in the press. And I apologize for that.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. Good evening to the Mr. Mayor and to the board. I wanted to say to you tonight that back in December and January, when the assessments were coming out, I think most of you recall, kind of panic setting in over what the increase was, related to the exorbitant prices of real estate over the COVID period, et cetera. And somehow that had settled into what the consultants told us was now the market. But at that time, when many of us were very concerned, the consultants and the mayor told us not to worry. Don't worry about how these assessments are this high because the mill rate and the budget then get adjusted and all of that will be taken into account. And this may not have the impact, the direct impact on your taxes. And so here we are today. And, to a certain extent, because when I was told not to worry, I kind of put that on the back burner and I didn't follow the budget as closely as I should have, and certainly not as closely as the people here have done their homework and giving you constructive feedback. But I really feel at this point that I can only describe it as a breach of the public trust that we're here tonight and seeing what these potential property tax increases really are going to be to us. It's shocking. And, I'll say to you, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, this really does fall to you. And I know that that there's some tough decisions that have to be made. I would ask though, I watched the debate the other night with your commission, and I would say that I was saddened and discouraged to see the scare tactic of suggesting that further cuts would lay off police, fire, and teachers. And I don't think that we should be, using that alarming terminology when there's other areas that we can consider. The tax increases that potentially will come out of this are devastating right now. Oops. For the many of us who have to live within budgets and our means ourselves, which I suggest the city should do. But agreeing with the speakers before me, it's not just what's happening this year, it's that this budget now becomes a baseline and we'll be saddled with this going forward based on that. So I would urge you to, instead of rating the rainy fund, to course correct now, really go back and take a hard look at this budget and slash non-essential services and non-essential positions to try to alleviate not just the burden today, but to make sure that this doesn't become the baseline going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Via Zoom, Dewan Wiggins.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, everyone. Dewan Wiggins, 20 Day Street. Yeah, so just echoing some of the comments I heard today, just thinking about the budget and the increase in taxes. I'm just speaking for myself and my constituents. I know it's tough. And, I've just spoken to a lot of my colleagues on the council as well as, other individuals that have to be, part of this process. And just thinking, and I mentioned this on another call about myself being affected by the tax increase, and not probably being able to stay in Norwalk. I just think that we all have to really consider the departments and see the effectiveness of the departments and seeing where we can cut. Just like the woman that just spoke before, when we think about, the future, this is going to be the baseline and our standard going forward, which means the next time there's an increase, it's going to just continue to push people out, and particularly a lot of people of color. So I know it's not much that can be done at this point. It's like a moving train, but if there is any hope, really go back and look at some of the possibilities of the cuts in some of the departments that might not be bringing value to the city. And I mentioned this before as well. What are we getting for the cuts? Like, we talked about services, but what are we really getting? What are the people getting? If they got to pay more taxes and pay more rent, like what do they get in return? Every time you purchase something, you getting something, right? So I think we should really consider that and think about that, because ultimately the city is a business as well, right? And the customers are the taxpayers. So we got to look at it in that way. Thank you guys. I know it's tough. And let's see what we can do.
Thank you, Dewan.
Margaret Walsh is next. Okay. David Smith up next. Okay. Marissa Mangone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Mangone and I live at 15 Ludlow Manor in East Norwalk. I was here today, not necessarily having anything planned to say, but first I want to thank you all for the work that you do for our city, and you, Mayor, as well, and everyone in this room for coming out and just, whoa, okay. And speaking. I just want to shine a light and on the youth and the children in our community. I'm a lifelong Norwalk resident. I came back here to raise my family, and I love this place. And I think that there are a lot of things that collectively we're doing as a community that are really strong. And I would hope that this group considers and continues to look at those essential services that we are providing to our children, that we are providing to our families, and continuing to support the district in ways that are making an impact. And so I just wanted to come up here and thank you all and let you know that, we're continuing to do this great work collectively, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marissa.
Next up is Mark Lilliadall.
Mark Lilliadall, One Island Drive in Norwalk, a 74-year-old resident of Norwalk, lived here my whole life. And I tell people I born here, grew up here, and I plan to die here. I have a couple questions for committee. Tom, maybe you can answer a couple of these and a couple of comments on it. When you look at
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr.
Pardon me?
This is not a Q&A session.
It's not a Q&A session.
No.
Well, I'll ask the questions, people can hear it, and then maybe you can go back on it. When
That's
you look
fine.
at some of the variances we see in the 23 to 24 budget, one of the three biggest ones are debt services. The question I would have with this group, and I hear someone has a baseline for where we are now, It depends on how our bonds are gonna roll over in the coming years. We've been having very good luck with the years past with low interest rates. It's high interest rates. You're gonna see that debt service increase substantially over a period of years. And I think that's something we should look at because that's gonna hit us quite a bit. I happen to see employee benefits have gone down, but I happen on the pension plans. I think we're in a defined benefit pension plan. And I see that, and I'm not sure if those are frozen or not, but very few people are in corporations and businesses are doing a defined benefit plan anymore. They're going to a defined contribution. So that may be somewhere where you could save a lot of money because there's a $2 million variance I see in that one. And then a contingency, I have no idea when that one's for. But you look at those, and that's probably about a 1%, about 1.5% to 2% off the budget, depending upon how those work where you could walk into. That's just some of the things I noticed about the budget and I wanted to bring up. The other thing I want to bring up is, Norwalk's a wonderful town. Why do people move to Norwalk in Fairfield County? Because they can't move anywhere else. They can't afford to go to Decatur, Wilton, Westport, one of those. So I understand that process, but we've got to keep it so people who do want to come here, they can contribute to it. One thing I want to say about the people sitting up here, just everybody knows, you pay taxes in Norwalk too. So you're going to be affected by this. It's not necessarily everybody here, but the services that we get for what we pay. When you do a budget, there are wants and then there are needs. We need to look at the needs and then the needs have to be there, but the wants, maybe we can adjust. There's a lot of things in here when you see the budget, there may be some wants to be able to take out of there and work towards it. Some people said cut the budget 5%, cut a budget 7%. You can't do that. You can't just take a budget and cut it 5% because there are so many different factors in there. Are there things in there could be cut to bring it down to 2%, maybe 1%? Perhaps. But with all the building we have in Norwalk and the things we have to support what's going on, it's going to increase the budget. But my concern is where this is going to go in the next few years because of some of those things I mentioned. That's something we have to look at.
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
I'll be take less than that. But what's going to happen now is this group up here in the council, they're going to sit and you're going to make your decisions. We have to live with your decisions. So think about that. Your decisions are going to affect everybody in Norwalk, every single person, from someone who lives in a little condo to someone who lives in a big house. That is something you have to do. Look at your wants, look at your needs, take care of the needs, and focus on the wants and adjust that, and you'll be good. And Tommy, I'll give you a call sometime, maybe we can ask all those questions I asked you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another Zoom participant, and apologies if I get the pronunciation wrong. It's John Pagler.
Sure, it's John Pagler. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. 14 Woodland. First of all, congratulations to those of you in the room, both in terms of participation and in terms of getting us to 4%. I imagine that wasn't easy, especially given that we're in a growing economy. Is there more to do? Perhaps I'll leave that kind of to you and to the audience to help try and figure out. But what I wanted to say was more along the lines of like the consternation really seems to be around the increases that our residents are going to be feeling through their property tax increases. And the fact that residents now will pay a higher proportion of the city budget than businesses. Listen, the valuations are what the valuations are, both for businesses and for residents. However, there is at least one geography in the state that has a bifurcated system for mill rate between residents and I believe that's the case in Hartford for residents and for businesses, and strongly encourage you to look at that to kind of equalize or take some of the burden off the residents in the city. Listen, I'm very, very pro-business, but the business valuations have gone down as a whole, as an aggregate, while the residential has gone up pretty substantially. So equalizing that or in some form or fashion, making that a kind of fairer rebase would be helpful.
Thank you, John.
Next up is Donna Smirniotopoulos. James, is there another sign-in sheet? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Donna Smirniotopoulos, 18 Shorefront Park. I'd like to thank you all for your service. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. Seems like every year we get to this time of year and we hear the same thing. This is the most difficult budget cycle ever. These are tough times. We have to make tough decisions. This probably is one of the tougher years. The city of Norwalk, just to put it in perspective, is closing in on a $500 million per year budget. That's a staggering figure. Ask yourselves, where is our money going? Do you see ample evidence that it is being put to good use? A big chunk of that, nearly $500 million, $1/4 of $1 billion is going to cover the superintendent's budget for the Norwalk Public Schools. That's a number that can never go down. Now you may ask yourselves, what are we getting for $1/4 of $1 billion education dollars? That's anybody's guess. To quote George W. Bush, is our children learning? Hard to say. The superintendent did not discuss student performance during her State of the Schools address, but I'm going to guess the answer is no. Too many students are still not performing at or above grade level, and no, you can't keep blaming the pandemic for institutional failures. Are there fewer fights in the schools, fewer lawsuits over wrongful terminations, less student need? Is more money coming in from Hartford? No, 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 and a big fat no. On the city side, there's the Department of Economic and Community Development, which did not exist before the mayor's reorganization. Remember, there was a woman named Liz Stocker who was released in 2017. She was making $91,000 per year. This department is closing in on $7 million a year, all while businesses are leaving town. The mayor's chief of staff has a pretty big budget. And then there's the debt service, something every single person at City Hall, starting with the mayor, should keep top of mind every budget cycle. These are tough times, unprecedented, and tough times require tough actions. The mayor warned that cutting the budget may mean reduced services, adding that budget cuts might lead to possibly laying off police officers, firefighters, teachers. Why police officers, firefighters, and teachers? Why not cut some of the bloat at City Hall and central office? Start collecting on blight fines. Stop getting into lawsuits, or worse, starting them. Make sure every penny spent on tourism has a projected return on investment. And when those benchmarks aren't met, do something different next time.
30 seconds.
Maybe even reduce non-essential positions, not police, firefighters, and teachers who, unlike most of the rest of us, have contracts and are protected by unions. Like many US cities, Norwalk received oodles of free money from Uncle Sam, nearly $40 million in ARPA money. The windfalls that put us in a 40-year inflationary spiral, making everything, including school construction, more costly. Where did that money go? Vanished in the wind on a little project here, a little tree planting there, a party, a Christmas tree rental. The BET should ask, why wasn't some of that money used to draw down our debt, which would have the side benefit of reducing debt service portion of the budget? Why? I'll hazard a guess. There's no photo op for paying your bills. As a homeowner whose property taxes have doubled since I bought here in 2012, I am begging you to stop the bleeding and cut this budget. Thank you.
All right, next up is Roberta DiBicelli.
That's good.
I did okay? All right. Well,
I don't speak Italian. I'm Roberta DiBicelli. I live on Osborne Avenue in East Norwalk. My husband and I bought our house in 2004. I expected the value to increase and of course the taxes as well. And they have, fairly for the most part. However, this year my house has been valued at a 46% increase, which I can assure you does not reflect the market value. Yes, I am appealing this on my own time, on my own money. In addition, now we are hit with this exorbitant mill rate increase, expecting residents to foot the bill due to your failure. And I'm sorry, everyone, it's a failure. To strategize and analyze properly is financially irresponsible. I urge you to revise and streamline this budget, cutting unnecessary expenses from City Hall, rather than essential services. And I want to echo what was said earlier, which is please take care of the needs. Take care of the needs and adjust the wants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on Zoom is Thomas Belmont.
Please state your name and your address once unmuted. Mr. Belmont, you're unmuted.
Let's move on. We can
Okay.
come back.
Next in the room, Diane Loricella.
Good morning, good evening. It's been quite a day. For the record, my name is Diane Loricella. I'm here representing the Norwalk Zero Waste Coalition, and I am a resident at 21 Little Fox Lane for 40 years plus. To begin with, each of the divisions and departments listed have done many good things, many forward-thinking projects. However, issues remain about whether other duties are needed, are being effective enough and creative. Mr. Mayor, when you proposed the reorg, I said, let's give it some time, a little bit of time to see if we will be more effective and efficient. I'm coming away this year stating that you need to rethink the reorganization. I'm not sure that we are capturing the funds we need through grants and that we're cutting enough funds through optimization of certain divisions, and I will get into it here. I wanted to shout out to Sunshine Week. That was begun in 2005 by journalists, and it's celebrated in mid-March near James Madison's birthday. It has to do with freedom of information and the dangers that can happen when we don't have transparency in our governance. Are we sustainably running our business or our city? Are we getting the bang for the buck? Unfortunately, I'm here tonight to say I think not. Now, I've come up here to you for years. Please review the records. I wanted to state on expenditures, I will start with what if and why not. I believe in zero-based budgeting. Do any of you? If not, why not? Under Public Works, to begin, the waste management programs in this city are not sustainably being run. They're not optimizing removal of, and this is my business model, removing enough of the reusable and recyclable materials due to lack of proper staffing that are knowledgeable and like to work with citizens like my group, Norwalk Zero Waste Coalition. We've presented right before the pandemic a whole list of ways to remove the valuable materials out of the trash, which is now going north of $105 per ton. We are the little chances that you have had with communications, Spin Doctor and
2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Tom Zabo are not effective. Number two, under electricity use, in all of this, the city buildings, including the schools, it is under 5241, I believe, is on your line in the budget. What are you doing to reduce effectively the use of electricity that on average at every building I looked at on the line items went up at least average of 11%?
Minutes.
I will wind up now stating that, have you looked at ways to optimize revenues? I think not, because enforcement is lacking. Look at the blight, some have mentioned it. Another type of revenue is realizing valuable things in your waste stream. Take a look also at the DEI person. Let's scrap that idea. There are many other ways to address the issues since George Floyd. Lastly, What we need here,
3 seconds.
thank you for letting me wrap up. I appreciate it. More transparency and dialogue. Could you please institute immediately a public participation section in at least quarterly your Board of Estimate and Taxation? And lastly, and I've said this before, I believe we would do even better, and I do appreciate all of your services by adding at least 1 or 2 other women on the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
4 minutes.
We're done.
So I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go back to Zoom, James, and try Thomas Belmont one more time, please.
Thomas, you should be able to speak. All right, we're gonna move on.
Next in the room, Maura Noor. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Noor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Moina Noor, and I live at 15 Pequot Drive. I am the current president of the Norwalk Library Board, and I'm here on behalf of the board to advocate for reinstating $100,000 to the library's part-time budget. The city's decision to cut the budget was made based on recent historical data. However, we ask that you reconsider this cut because it impacts our ability to meet some important community needs. We had 3 positions that were denied as a result of the budget cuts, and the library is doing its part. 2 of these positions we had prior to COVID, and they were not, and now that we're back up running full-time, we will not have those positions. So as we restore our services post-COVID, we are operating 7 days a week with extended evening hours. And we would like to reinstate these following positions through our part-time budget. A part-time passport agent to oversee passport services. Prior to COVID, we had a very robust passport service, which was actually generating revenue for the city. We have recently completed a renovation of our Norwalk Literacy Volunteers space, and we need part-time staff to service this really beloved and very, very well-used program, primarily serving English language learners. And one of our positions was for that was denied was for a 3rd custodian. So we are asking for this additional funding for the part-time budget for 2 part-time custodians to replace the request for 1 full-time custodian. We aim to cover our custodial needs while managing costs effectively and efficiently. This, of course, as you know, for a building that's open for 2 buildings that are open for 104 hours collectively is really a matter of cleanliness and safety, and it's used by so many people. Thank you for considering our request, and thank you for all that you do to support our libraries.
Thank you. Thank you, Moina.
Konstantin Stoyanov.
Good evening, everyone. Konstantin Stoyanov, Wallace Avenue in East Norwalk. And so first, I just want to say thanks for all the hard work. We know this is a lot of work, especially in budgeting and financing with a tough year. So that's appreciated. In spite of that, we have to recognize 2 things. One is that this is not an equitable outcome in spite of what might be very good efforts. And it's not an equitable outcome both between commercial and residential, and also within residential districts. So for example, there are 2 districts with 30% increase in an assessment, but one gets 10% median increase, the other one 25. Okay, so in spite of our efforts, this is not an equitable budget, and we have to accept it. And the second thing is this is what I say is a crisis time, because it doesn't seem like we're heading towards a sustainable path. And so what does this mean? Based on these really learnings for me, one thing is that we should find a way to make it more equitable for any given budget between constituents. And I know there may be some restrictions, but whatever tools you have available at your disposal, it might not be the full range of what we wish it to be, but I encourage you to use every single one of them to the full extent possible. And the second part of that same point is I encourage you to work with the legislature and whoever you need to make it happen. It might take longer. I assume other towns, other communities will be in the same situation. So we wouldn't be the only ones. So there might be a critical mass to go pursue this option. And I think we should try to be the leaders in this effort rather than followers. So we can set a good example for everyone. But whenever we're able to do it, and hopefully sooner than later, this will be a very, very good tool to have at your disposal and our disposal. And I encourage you to do everything you can do to pursue it. So this is the one part, just make it more equitable within any given budget. The second part is, in the meantime, we have to decide what the budget is.
2 minutes, 30 seconds.
And I think reducing 5% is the minimum you should pursue. And I don't think it will happen by just incremental efforts, unfortunately, but I wish it was the case. I really think we have to start from scratch and kind of say, hey, if I had the chance to build this department from ground zero today, what would it look like? This relates to zero cost budgeting that was mentioned before, but you really have to start from scratch. And I think we should use this crisis to actually, this is the perfect time to design the city so it becomes sustainable and thriving. If we don't do that, we'll go in the opposite direction. And I trust that you have the skills to set it on sustainable path. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Scott Goodwin next.
Hi, my name is Scott Goodwin. I live at 6 Pine Hill Avenue here in Norwalk, which is why I'm here. So I actually did not plan to speak tonight, but then as I was hearing people, I thought, that's a good point, and that's a good point. So I'm going to take it back a step. 2 years ago, I see our former CFO, Mr. Dakowitz, is on Zoom, and I remember he was in a council meeting. And he was joking about the ARPA money and $1 million here, $1 million there, who knows? And it was all fun and games at the time, but because we were flush with ARPA money, but now we're not. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, I'm the guy who usually doesn't care about tax increases. I feel like that's part of, keeping the wheels of society greased, if you will, that I like roads, I like firemen, I like policemen. So these are the things that we do to keep these things running. But then I hear, oh, our school budget is 50% of that $500 million budget. And I think, oh, that's a lot of money. And then I'm like, well, how does Norwalk do in its school system? And then I looked at my house valuation versus Westport, because that's the town right next door. My same house in Westport, double the valuation, but the same taxes as you're going to give me this year based on this new budget. So right there, I feel like Constantine said, there's an inequity here. I could live 2 miles, 3 miles down the road and in the same house, pay fewer taxes. Well, maybe our schools are better. No, Westport has the #1 school system in the state. And I looked at Norwalk and I had to scroll, and I scrolled for the first 5 minutes of this meeting, looking to find Norwalk school rankings. And then I say, okay, well, what is the value that we are getting for the 30 to 35% increase that this budget is looking for? It doesn't match inflation. What's inflation? 5%? This is 7 times inflation. I look at my own personal compensation increase over the last year. I got an exceeds expectations at work. I got a
30 seconds.
great review. I got a 3% raise. You have not exceeded my expectations. And you're looking for a 35% raise. And I find that unacceptable. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's all that we have signed up to speak at this point in time. If there is anyone else who would like to make a comment, you're welcome to come to the lectern at this time.
Someone has, Mr. Chairman, if someone left out one other thing, are they allowed to come back?
Unfortunately, you are not. However, you can submit those comments in writing. They will be added to the minutes of the meeting. Mr. Mayor, any closing remarks?
No, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Contrary to popular belief, we did hear you. We listened. What you said to us is very important. As I mentioned earlier, this is a work in progress. We're still looking to identify revenue streams that we can tap into. Also looking at the possibility of cutting some more budgets in certain areas. But again, thank you for coming out. I know it's a little rainy outside, and we do appreciate your concerns. We share your concerns. This is not pleasant for us either, but thank you again for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, may I get a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Sure.